Welcome to We Don't Have Cookies with your host, Jason Marshall.
Welcome to We Don't Have Cookies. I'm your host, Jason Marshall. Before we get started, I want to apologize for the last episode. There was a lot of audio issues. If you were one of the first people who downloaded it, I apologize. And if you are one of those people, God bless you for coming back. I don't know if I would have. Today, my guest is the host of Tales from the Hardside podcast and one of the hosts of the Gym City podcast, Izzy Rocks. How you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm pretty good now that we've started the show after we've been talking for a while, and unfortunately I did not tell my guest that had not started the show, so I apologize for that.
It's
maybe
a good
we
conversation.
Maybe we'll put that out as a bonus episode.
Dude,
because I did have the recorder going, but I didn't officially start. I felt bad. Maybe we'll put that out. That will be the 5th episode for this week, and you can hear the awkward moment where I said, "Hey, wait, I think he thinks that we're doing the show."
I definitely did, but yeah, man, I
apologize.
I love to have an excuse to sit down and chat with somebody on a podcast anyway. So yeah, I'm cool with it. It gives me an excuse to sit down and put my phone down and have an adult conversation.
Yeah, I love doing this, man. If I could do it 5 days a week, which this week that might happen, I would do it every week, man. But before I get started talking to you, I want to thank you for the mentions on your podcast. Yeah. I feel shitty that I didn't do it a long time ago.
Oh, it's all good, man.
Because I heard the episode, and I think at that point, it was from the Dayton Podfest. Mm-hmm. You said something about getting mentioned on the show for that. And I think I was like a month or so behind on my podcast. And I meant to send you a message, and it's been so long.
Dude, it's all good. I know how podcasting goes. I subscribe to many of them that sometimes I have to miss out on them. Sometimes I get in these streaks where I'll listen to certain ones. But yeah, man.
How many are you subscribed to?
Oh, dude, I probably subscribed to anywhere between 20 and 30. At one time, it was probably 40 to 50. But I listened to maybe on a regular basis, I listen to 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think I'm up to 50 or 60 now.
Yeah.
And man, that takes up so much of your time. There's so many out there that I want to listen to.
Yeah.
But when you're subscribed to that many, man, it really makes it hard to find the time sometimes.
Yeah, one of my favorites is Joe Rogan's podcast, and he has so many different guests, and they're like 2 to 3 hours long, and sometimes he releases them 3 or 4 days a week. And so a lot of the MMA ones, even though I appreciate MMA and I like it, I don't really get geeky into it, and I don't follow it that much. Yeah. And so some of those episodes I'll skip depending on what's out there. I try to pay attention locally to the Dayton, Ohio area, to the podcasts that are going on here, and check those podcasts out. Some stick around, some go away. But I love to support the local community and check them out.
That's one thing about podcasts, man. You see a lot of people get excited because they're launching their first episode. Yeah. 2 to 3 shows later, man, they're out, you know?
Yeah, dude. I've been doing this since 2012, since April of 2012, and I've seen a graveyard of 5-episode podcasts. Some didn't even get that far, because to really do this, you know, a lot of people think, oh, I'll just turn on a microphone and talk. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about all the scheduling and emailing and editing and releasing, and there's a lot of work. And if you're volunteering for it and then you're worried about the numbers and things like that, and they don't come, a lot of people get frustrated. And then they've spent a bunch of money on equipment that they're not using now.
And that's the thing with podcasts is nobody's looking for you, man.
No.
I mean, you have to try to build the audience on your own because there's, maybe 500,000 just comedy podcasts out there. You're not even including the wrestling podcasts and the sports podcasts and the video game There's a podcast for everything. There's a podcast for horse racing or something. I forget what it was. It's hosted by Glenn the Geek, and it gets a ton of downloads from people in that community.
Yeah, dude.
Anything you want, man, there's a podcast out there for it. And if you're not willing to put the work in, people just move on to something else.
They do. That my podcast, Tales from the Hardside, I really don't treat it as like, I haven't looked at the download numbers in a year and a half.
Wow.
Just because at this point I'm not releasing it for anything but me.
Yeah.
It's just an archive of what I have going on. And I built a nice little following when I first started with Joe Rogan's community, the Death Squad community.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a bunch of my friends who, they're a podcast who's been around for 10 years, The Mediocre Show. Their community was called the Mediocre Nation. Their host, Eric Tomorrow, put out all this merch. And they did live shows. Like, he really revolutionized a lot of podcasting early on and doesn't get the credit because a lot of these bigger comedians and actors and anybody can get in podcasting now and get instant. If you have a name, people will listen to you.
Yeah. When
I first started listening to podcasts, I sought out Adam Carolla, Kevin Smith, like all the standard people who I knew before. And then over the years, I listened to Adam Carolla's podcast and listened to like local podcasts like yours. But it was Ari Shafir's podcast, Skeptic Tank, that made me realize like I could just have a conversation about anything. Mm-hmm. And it made me realize I could do it. And so I launched mine in April of 2012 after hearing his and after connecting with this community. I was like, I heard a dude. He was named Postal Poet, and he had a podcast that he did on his iPhone where he just talked to people at work. And then there was another chick in Boston. She was named Mish the Dish on Twitter. It was this part of this community. And she would sit in her car and talk, just rant in her phone. And with her Boston accent, it was like the most interesting thing that I had heard. It was like raw punk rock podcasting. And I thought to myself, if they're doing this, with just this and I'm entertained, somebody else is going to listen to what I'm doing. And so I've appreciated putting together content. And then when my buddy Eric came along and did the Gym City podcast and saw that I had done some videos, so I had put myself out there, I really wanted to bring back to the Dayton area and showcase what was out there. And I feel like we've gotten to the point where we're on it's like coasting now, mm-hmm. you know? Now we pick up like we do live shows, we record on location. I just released my 100th Storyteller episode, which we release those on Wednesdays with different bands and musicians from the area. And we've connected with that many people from the area. I don't get paid for it, and it takes a lot of editing to put these episodes together. I'm doing all the producing behind the scenes as far as all the other podcasts when we release on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So it's a lot of labor of love to do what I do. And I still love it, dude. Like when you messaged me about coming out and chatting, I was so excited because I get so excited about just creating conversations with people.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you out, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, dude.
Real quick, while we're still on the topic of podcasting, one of the favorite podcasts I listen to, it's a wrestling podcast called In Your Head.
Yeah.
Half of the show, if not more, isn't about wrestling. It's just them sitting around bullshitting.
Yeah.
But when that podcast first started, it was a guy who was recording it using a VCR.
For real?
Yeah. So that took a lot of effort to make that kind of a podcast because now people can just go out, buy equipment. Some people, like you said, are doing it in their phone.
Yeah.
And back in the day, man, it took a lot of effort. So for them to come out and do something like that, where the dude's recording it into a VCR so he can put it out for other people to hear,
wow.
You know, I can't imagine having that rough of a road to go down where I'm recording
that's
that
like
way.
Jack White was in a documentary about guitars, and I forget what it's called, but he made a guitar out of just this stuff that was laying around, and it actually sounded good. You know, when you have somebody who's doing a VCR or podcast that I listen to called The Mediocre Show, one of the podcasts that they hooked up with early on recorded, I think it was on tape, on actual like real tape.
No shit.
And then put it into digital. So to hear people do that, like I have an appreciation for somebody who goes out of their way to do something like that. I don't know what the quality would be like, but
well, you know, their heart's in it at the very least, you know?
Yeah. When you talk to anybody who's passionate about anything, if they can convey their message in the right way, I'm there with them.
Yeah.
Like, I may not follow wrestling all that much anymore. Back in the day, I used to. But when I listen to podcasts that you have on and you talk to people that are involved with wrestling, like it makes me excited and passionate about or excited that you're excited about it.
Yeah, I thought about maybe doing a WrestleMania episode this year as a bonus episode, like on a Saturday or something. I don't know.
You definitely should, dude.
Yeah, because I could have a few people on. I think that would be pretty interesting, but we'll see. If you want that episode, just email me, jason@wedon'thavecookies.com. We'll leave it up to a group vote, I guess. Real quick, I got a question from last week's guest. For those who are not regular listeners, what I do is I ask my last guest a question for my next guest without the last guest knowing who my next guest will be. This question is, what are 5 things you never want your mom to say to you?
What are 5 things you never want your mom to say to you? Well, my mom, who has been on the podcast, is known to say whatever comes to her mind, no matter who's in front of her, and it's been embarrassing at times, even though I love her. So let's see. Number 1, I hate you. Okay. Number 2, I hope you die. Number 3, get out of my house. Number 4, you were never my child.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And number 5, what would a good number 5 be? Man, the abortion didn't go through. I just never told you.
Oh, that's a rough one, man.
Yeah, that's some dark stuff right there, man. You know, I grew up with the most interesting people that I knew growing up were people who had it rough and who came from not the best upbringing. And some of those people, even though they're crazy and out of this world, they're some of the most interesting people I've ever had conversations with. And I may not want to live that experience that they had, but like when you grow up around snow and stuff like that, there's a roughness that you have about life that, you know, man, if I got stuck out in that shit, I could die. Like,
yeah.
I think, yeah, so that was dark. Good questions though.
Well, just to lighten things up. There was a shopkeeper in China. He had glass doors on his store. He found one of them completely shattered. So he was watching the security cam footage. Turns out it was shattered by a dog that was chasing a cat.
What?
Yeah, I'll have that video up on the website. You can go to wedon'thavecookies.com and check that out. It was pretty crazy, man. The dog just takes off running after this cat, and the cat kind of goes around the door slightly, and the dog just doesn't see that it's a door because it's pure glass.
I saw that video. Yeah,
did you?
I can't imagine that dog didn't get a concussion from that.
I know.
he hit that glass pretty hard, dude.
It definitely took his mind off the cat because it ran in the whole other direction after that door came down.
Have you ever hit a glass door or anything like that?
Well, I was going to Cleveland once. I didn't hit the glass door, but one of my cousins had to go to the bathroom really bad. And it was like, I don't know, 11 or midnight, something like that. And he took off running for the bathroom inside this truck stop. And it was all glass and just ran right into the glass window and fell on his ass. That was pretty funny to see. And that's the closest that I've come to that. But I did shut my head in my car door once. Which I think was probably worse than running into a glass door.
That?
It was back in the day when I smoked. I used to manage a cell phone store, went outside, got my cigarettes, and I thought that I could get right back in the car before the door shut to grab my lighter. And I almost got out of the car. I was very close to being out of the car, but not close enough. And the top of the door hit, which of course it's the pointy part of the door that hit my head. And I tried to no-sell it like, everything's fine. Nothing happened to me. I'm standing outside of my shop, smoking my cigarette, just casually touching my head every so often to see if there was any blood.
Have you ever embarrassed yourself in front of a group of people, like fallen or done anything like that?
Oh, I'm positive I have. Yeah, I know I have at some point. There was a time where, I don't know if they had this in Dayton, in your area, but there was a big thing about cruising up and down and and everything back in like the 90s. I think that was more of a
Piqua thing than Dayton. I don't think Dayton really had anything like that, but definitely people would drive up to Piqua to do it.
I got really, really drunk, which wasn't unusual. But this night I was way too drunk, and I was in the back of this girl's car because we just car hopped every now and then. Thankfully, I was in somebody else's car, not driving my own. And while we were driving down the road, I'm throwing up out of her window.
I've done that a few times.
And that was kind of embarrassing, but I guess it wasn't really embarrassing because I was too drunk to give a shit. So I don't know if that counts. Looking back, it's embarrassing. At the time, I didn't care.
Yeah.
How about you?
Oh yeah, dude. Well, something happened just last night.
Oh yeah.
You know, I wanted to take a proactive effort to lose some weight. I'm going to Florida in May, so I got rid of sugar and carbs, basically doing a keto diet. So I was chopping up some strawberries before work to get my lunch ready because I'm packing lunch, make sure everything's good. And the knife was on the counter, and I thought, oh, well, I should move that knife so the dog doesn't get up there and possibly knock it off on the floor. So I grabbed this knife, and as I grab it, it slips out of my hand, and the world freezes it. And then
it's all slow motion. Isn't
all
it?
of a sudden, this pain where I realized, like, oh shit, it hit my toe, and it stabbed my toe, and then blood splatters everywhere.
Oh shit.
Yeah, dude, it was not a good moment. And I was like 5 minutes before I had to leave for work. And so my wife was like, what are you going to do? Because she kept having to open the wound to make sure that the blood was getting out. And I was like, just tape it up. I got to go. I can't call in. I can't be late. So I manned it up, went to work, and got it done and over with. But yeah, that was an embarrassing moment where I was like, I could have done that differently.
How long you been married?
I've been married 21 years.
Wow. Yeah. Awesome. High school sweethearts?
Well, I met her when she was going to Chaminade Julienne. She was 17 and I was 18. I knew her friend. Her friend dated my brother. And so we met, and I was ready to settle down by then, believe it or not, because from the time I was 14 years old until I was 18, I was pretty much slutting around, being a teenager. Like, my kids are not like me at all then. And it shocks me. I'm like, how come you guys aren't obsessed with girls? But once I had sex, dude, I could not, like, it was all I could think of.
It is pretty nice.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's the greatest thing. But so we met when she was 17 and I was 18, and I was just like, I asked her to marry me not too long after that. And obviously we didn't get married then, and we waited a few years. We went on vacations. I like her parents. Her parents liked me. My dad left when I was 2. And so the idea of being a father freaked the fuck out of me. And I've embraced it fully, and like been a coach, been a scout leader. I do videos for my son. I have good conversations with him. I have him on my podcast all the time. And so I really embraced fatherhood and what it meant. And, I grew up around a lot of people who were super dysfunctional because they just moved from one relationship to another. And they were always seeking the other side, which isn't always greener. And so I found a good girl who is super supportive, even though she doesn't listen. She's never listened to any of my podcasts. She's supportive that I have hobbies, and her dad has a bunch of hobbies. Like, this dude's almost 70 and rode 65 miles on a bike last week.
Nice.
I was like, wow, okay.
Keeps you young, man.
Yeah.
Got to stay busy.
Most dudes I grew up with that were that age could barely walk if they were even alive. So he's an inspiration. So yeah, man, we've been together for a long time. And, I hear dudes bitching about their wives a lot. And I've never been that type of person. Like,
yeah, you said you listen to my podcast.
I know how it goes sometimes. Some people, they get involved in relationships that are rocky. And I remember crazy girls, they had the best sex. Mm-hmm. But
yeah,
there's something about, as you grow older, that you want a more stable relationship with somebody who's not so crazy. And
it makes it hard to get out of those relationships.
Oh yeah.
It's weird. Yeah. The crazier they are, the better the sex is. I don't know how that correlates, man, but it happens every time.
It's I dated a few of those girls back when I was in high school. Yeah, I was a hoodlum, dude. In East Dayton, I was a hoodlum.
I'm right there with you.
I was the type of kid that would go around and stab tires. We would shoplift. We would we would skip school and ride the bus all day. Like, I'm surprised I didn't get killed.
I'm kind of shocked I lived this long. If you talk to anybody who knew me in my early 20s to high school days, every time I see them, and I haven't seen them in a while, they seem very surprised that I'm still alive and I'm okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But if you talk to anybody who's known me since my mid-20s to now, if they hear of any of the stories that I did when I was younger, they're extremely shocked that I used to be that kind of person.
Yeah, me too.
It's really weird, man. Some switch flipped somewhere, but
yeah. What happened?
I had a really severe drinking problem.
Yeah.
And one day I just went out with some people from work, and they were managers, and we drank till, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning. And it didn't really occur to me that they don't have to be at work the next day.
Yeah.
I do. And I was just getting into a relationship with my current wife, and we had a phone conversation because she quit drinking, and, you know, she doesn't really like alcoholics that much.
Right.
And she could tell I was really drunk the night before, and she was kind of annoyed with how I was acting, and she didn't really want to be around that kind of a person because she has a kid. And the next day I get up to go to work, and I'm super late. I show up, and they're talking to me like, "Hey man, you got an issue." And and then when I left, I think I went to break or lunch or something. I was talking to my wife, and she was talking about how she's not sure if this is going to work out.
Whoa.
And it was like, holy shit, all these things kind of happened within a span of maybe 2 to 3 hours. And I already knew I had a drinking problem anyway. It was pretty fucking obvious. I get up in the morning, I had cranberry and vodka, and I'd smoke a joint while I'm getting ready for work. I'd go to work. I would have a few shots on my lunch. I can't say I'd get drunk. There is the one time I got way too drunk on my break or on my lunch. I came back to work, and I knew that I was way too late coming back. Yeah. So I tried to seek out my boss to apologize to her.
Oh, no.
So I see her at the end of the hallway, and I'm yelling her name. And when I get her attention, she starts walking towards me. I realize, oh, wait, I'm drunk as fuck. Oh. She can probably smell it. Maybe this isn't the best idea. I could have just sent her an email when I got to my desk. While she's walking towards me, I'm trying to apologize for being late as I walk backwards.
Oh, no.
And then there's the time I showed up really drunk. Well, I was hungover. I showed up like, I don't know, around 11. I was supposed to be there at 8. And I showed up at 10 because it was break time. So I just went ahead and took my break. I remember being outside, and we worked at this big place. There was like a walking path with a pond and everything. And my friend was walking around the walking path with a group of guys. And I just kept laughing and yelling, "Hey, there's Blue Shirt Roger. Hey, everybody, look, there's Blue Shirt Roger." That wasn't his nickname. I just called him that because he had a blue shirt on. I have no idea why. I go inside the building. There's these ladies gathered around a vending machine who did not like me. And I walk up and I put my arms around both of them. I say, "I love you guys.
Oh my goodness.
If you guys were food, you'd be tacos." Because I love tacos. I didn't even think about the sexual innuendo that they probably immediately thought of. It was just an honest, like, I love tacos. And you guys, I'm really surprised that I didn't get fired that day. But we had 3 buildings. And I'm on the far side. I get an email from my friend who's on the complete opposite building that says, "Hey, man, you need to settle down. People are talking about how drunk you are."
Oh, shit. Oh, my goodness, dude.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I was really insane when I was drinking, and I knew I had to tone it down. But that day was the catalyst for all of it.
Wow, dude.
Yeah. It was almost like working at the place on Office Space.
Yeah.
And people really legitimately thought that I was trying to get fired because I would call in and be like, "Yeah, I'm going to be late." And I would show up around, I don't know, noon the next day. And I'm like, "What? I said I was going to be late." And
Yeah, yep. Yeah, young and irresponsible days, dude.
I didn't say how late. 36 hours-ish? I don't know.
Yeah, I think one of the most irresponsible things I did with substance was I had always enjoyed psychedelic drugs. A lot of people got into cocaine or got into pills or anything like that. And at 17, I had a bad experience with alcohol where I got a bottle of vodka and a gallon of orange juice, and within a half an hour, and I had never really got drunk at all before.
Yeah.
Within a half an hour, 3/4 of that bottle of vodka was gone and just a little bit of orange juice.
Wow.
And I spent the rest of the night puking. And I think I got alcohol poisoning. Didn't go to the hospital or anything like that. But forever after that, anytime I would try to drink, I would throw up. So I started getting into like smoking weed and taking psychedelics. Like I used to take acid all the time and go to Pantera mosh pits or White Zombie mosh pits back in the day. Or I would go to places like Lollapalooza or just anywhere and have a unique experience. We used to take acid all the time and go see movies or I remember one time I was downtown for the fireworks, downtown Dayton at the Art Institute, and I'm with my buddy and a couple other friends, and my buddy sparks up a joint in front of there's a whole crowd, and I'm starting to trip on acid. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? And this is back in the 90s where it wasn't like, everybody has vape pens and everything now. You can't see, but you could tell when somebody was smoking a joint then. So fireworks are over and I get in my car and everybody else is in the car and I start driving, and instantly, I don't know if you've ever done acid, but there's these waves that start happening, and it's been a very long time since I have done it, but time and space were messing with my mind, and I was just trying to get home, like, please, just let me get through this. And then I get home and my friend convinces me I got to go home and get my acid so I can be on you guys' level. And that was the worst experience I've ever had in my life.
Really?
Oh yeah, it was bad. It was a really bad trip. I was like, I'm just going to pull over and park, which I should have. So it makes me happy that we're going to have self-driving cars very soon, so you won't have kids who are distracted on psychedelics and texting. We didn't even have texting, dude.
Yeah, that's true. I never had anything like that growing up, and
no.
God, I'm kind of glad I didn't.
No, right?
Because
made you appreciate like GPS. We talked about GPS before the podcast started.
Yeah.
How you just give somebody your address now and you use an app like Waze, which will take you around traffic jams and they'll let you know cops are there. Dude, that shit would have been so nice in the 90s, but we had like MapQuest maybe. We had maps where you actually had to go to AAA and get maps.
Yeah.
They would do a trip thing for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we would go out of state, we would go to AAA and they would map out a way to get there.
Dude, I couldn't even imagine being a comedian back in the 70s and 80s trying to tour with just having maps. I do think that instead of using GPS, sometimes it's important to just drive and figure out your area. Like my son's 17 and we could have got his license a long time ago. And when he's driving, I have to let him know, just drive wherever you want. Don't worry. We don't have to go anywhere. Just drive wherever you want. I want him to have that experience of just going and driving and having fun. But we did some crazy shit when we were driving around. Like back in the day, I can't believe we didn't get killed more. I can't believe I didn't die in some of the stuff that we did.
Didn't have airbags either.
No.
At least I didn't. I grew up kind of poor, but I mean, if you got in a wreck, man, you were pretty fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't have any of these designs where your car crumples a certain way to lessen the impact. You're in these big metal cars and if you hit a pole, man.
Dude, I had a 77 Cutlass Supreme for my first car, and my buddy had an 88 Delta. These were huge cars to learn how to drive in with powerful engines.
Yeah.
Like I had a 350, whatever. I've never been really good with cars, but it was a car that was way more powerful than I should have been driving when I first started learning how to drive.
And you got to learn to parallel park.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I drive a Kia Soul now, and my son, I told him that's the last thing where he's struggling with is parallel parking. And to be honest, you don't really have to do it much these days.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to like downtown Dayton or Yellow Springs. There's a lot of places where there's parking lots and you can back in and back out. So hopefully he'll get through that. That's the last thing.
Well, it's time for us to take a break, but it's also tax time. If you live in Ohio and you need help with your taxes, visit our friends over at taxtimeusa.com. That's spelled TAXTYME.com.
George R.R. versus J.R.R. Tolkien. Brace yourselves! Gather up your trolls and your soldier elves, and your ents and your orcs and your wargs and your stings, your dwarves and clam drains. Cause there's a new literary lord in the ring. My readers fall in love with every character I've written, then I kill them. And they're like, what he did? All your bad guys die, and your good guys survive. We can tell what's gonna happen a page in age 5. We're all seeing how to find some sex in your movie. Yeah. Ditch the Goonie and cast a couple boobies. There's engineer plots and not David the Gnome. Your hobbit hole heroes can't handle my throne. Kings, queens, dragons, dwarves, horses, fortresses, magic, and swords. You have bit my whole shit, you uninspired hack. You want a war, George? Welcome to Shire Rock. In book sales, you got nothing to say. I'm number 1 and 2. You're under 50 shades of gray. I got the pros of a pro. Your shit's subpar. You're a pirate. You even stole my RRO. We all know the world is full of chance and anarchy. So yes, it's true to life for characters that die randomly. But newsflash, the genre's called fantasy. It's meant to be unrealistic, you myopic vanity. I conscientiously object to what you're doing on these beasts. I'll cut you like my teeth on Beauty and the Beast. You went too deep, Professor Tweed Pants. We don't need the backstory on every fucking tree branch. I cut my teeth in the trenches of the Somme. You locked your Santa Claus ass through Vietnam. And it's hard for me to take criticism on clothes from a dude who sends a raven to say hi to his toes. Man, your fat jokes are worse than your pipe smoke. My show's the hottest thing on HBO. I'm rock and roll, you're a nerdy little nebbish, and I may be dirty, but you got a hairy foot fetish, dog. Even the names of your characters suck. You got buffers and bofers and brandy bucks. I got a second breakfast for all them goofy fucks. Lift up my gut and teabagging's my nuts. C.S. Lewis and I were just discussing how you and Jon Snow both know nothing. Because the backstory on my box office is billions. Got my children making millions off my Silmarillions, and I'm more rock and roll than you ever been. Don't believe me? Ask Led Zeppelin. You can't reach this fella. Shit, I'm too towering. Every time I battle, it's Return of the King. Ho, whoa, holster, you just saw. Up, rock. Those are history.
Do you have an impression request for Marco Fuji or just want to contact the show? Send an email to jason@wedonthavecookies.com.
You can also call 929-266-9342 and leave a voicemail. Next thing we're going to get into was a story that almost made it to this week's Dumbass of the Year. It's a Florida police officer that drove off with a gas pump handle still in the car.
You know, I wonder how people do that. When I see pictures of it happening, I've never done it myself. It would freak me out if I ever did something like that. But yeah, man, you wonder. You are a dumbass. You have to admit, I'm a dumbass if I did that.
Not so fun fact, I've done that.
Have you really?
Yes. And I felt like a complete dumbass. Side note, I was a complete dumbass.
So you tore it off and everything?
Completely. Gas was spraying everywhere. And the guy who worked there told me to just keep going once he got the handle out of the car.
Yeah, he was like, there's nothing we get. How old were you?
17.
Wow. Yeah, well.
And I just got my license. I didn't get my license till I was 17. So, yeah.
We are dumbasses at 17, so it's okay.
Thank God it was just some podunk gas station just off of the side of the city limits in front of an abandoned furniture store.
Yeah.
And that guy was the only one working, and I was probably the only customer there in the last hour. But I felt really dumb, and I had my friend Aaron in the car, and so unfortunately there was a witness, and yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I haven't done it, but yeah, that definitely is a dumbass move.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you asked if I ever did anything to embarrass myself in a group of people. If you count 2, there you go.
2 is a group.
We got some things to go into right after the story, so if you think that I'm getting to this week's Dumbass of the Year a little soon, you're kind of right, but there's more after this that involves Izzy Rock. The next thing we're going to do, like I've said twice already, is this week's Dumbass of the Year is a Canadian driver who followed his GPS into a streetcar tunnel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So earlier in the show, we were talking about how great GPS is, and it is.
Yeah.
But there's also those points where you kind of got to watch where you're going to and make sure the signs are, telling you not to go down a path your GPS tells you to. You got to take a little personal responsibility.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. The Office had a great episode where they drove into the lake or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because they followed GPS. Yeah, you definitely got to be aware of your surroundings. And there's times where I'll take it off highway, and then or where I'll avoid highways, and then I'll forget that I took it off. And my wife is like, "Why are you not getting on the highway?" And I said, "Because it's taking me around. There must be a traffic jam or something." And I realized I was the dumbass there that I didn't take it off. And I was like, "Oh yeah, that was my fault."
Have you ever drove anywhere you weren't supposed to?
Yeah. There's certain cities like Detroit, and some cities have a lot of one-way streets. And there's a couple times where I found myself driving down a one-way street, but driving somewhere I wasn't supposed to. Okay, so I picked up a hitchhiker when I was 18 years old, and I had broke down on the side of the road a few weeks before this, and I was like, man, this sucks. No cell phone. I had to walk, and so a guy was when you're going to downtown Dayton, you get off on Main Street to go over by the Oregon District on 35, and there was a guy kind of in the off-ramp, not pulled onto the side of the road. And I was like, I'll help him out. So I pulled over, and he was like, "Hey, man, can you take me down to the gas station to fill up this gas tank?" And so I took him down there. He didn't have anything to fill it up with. I had a water jug, and I started filling up with with gas. And they immediately saw what I was doing and shut the tank off. And the guy, he said, "Hey, man, can you just run me over to Cincinnati Street real quick?"
Oh, okay. Cincinnati Street.
Can you? Yeah, not Cincinnati. Can you run me over to Cincinnati Street real quick? And I was like, all right. So I was being a nice guy. I was naive. So I drove him over there, and I was in my big 77 Cutlass Supreme, and he left the door open. And I was like, man, this is not a good area to be in. This is like a really bad area. It's over by the old St. Elizabeth Hospital. A lot of crime. And he gets back into the car, and he's like, "All right, go ahead and drive. And he was like, "Hey, man, you want any of this?" And he had bought crack.
Oh.
So I took a guy to buy crack. So I was not supposed to be taking somebody that I helped. And so I vowed I'll never do that again. So that guy ruined it for whoever is broke down on the side of the road. I hope they have cell phones.
I have a story similar to that in the Oregon District. We were walking out of a bar. Some guy came up and asked if we could give him a ride. And he said something about how I think he would sell my friend, I think Aaron was with us. He was going to sell him a joint for $5, but we had to take him to wherever it was to get him. My friend Dave was driving, gets in the back of the car. I don't even know the area enough to know where we were going,
Sure.
But I knew it wasn't good. And we get to this really rundown apartment building that didn't even look like it was habitable. It looked vacant.
Yeah.
And we stopped.
Probably was.
And the whole way there, he was talking about some hooker that we need to get. Her name's Quick Draw. She could get us off in like 5 minutes. And he just kept telling us over and over about this hooker. We get to the place. We let him out. As soon as he gets out, he starts walking up to the building. I guess we were just waiting for him to come back with that joint. And next thing you know, here comes like this group of people, like 5 to 6 people.
Oh, shit.
And my friend Dave, he's probably, 6'8". I think he was 320 pounds, something
Big
like
guy.
that. So he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
But I was always the smallest person in whatever group I was in. I think at the time I was maybe 120 pounds.
Sure.
And I'm ready to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
My friend Aaron wasn't much bigger than I am. And Dave's just watching him walk to the car. And I keep saying, "Hey, man, let's just go." And where we're parked is right in front of a fence. The only way is to back up. Yeah. And the closer they get, the less likely it is we're going to back up.
Yeah.
Because, unless he wants to run him over. And knowing Dave, I guess that is a possibility. possibility. But yeah, I was scared shitless, man. And we ended up just backing up and taking off at the last moment. I think Dave just wanted to watch us sweat.
Dude, you got so lucky. Yeah, I saw many things. The punch out game, the knockout game that was going around a couple years ago. I was waiting at a bus stop at 3rd and Main Street in downtown Dayton back in the 80s, and this middle-aged white dude was just standing there minding his own business, waiting on the bus, not doing anything. And these 3 black teenagers walked up, and one of them just sucker punched this guy. And one of my guilty pleasures is watching World Star hip hop videos of fight compilations and knockouts and things like that. And it makes me realize, like, people are fucking crazy, and I don't want to get my head kicked, soccer kicked, so I avoid any sort of violence whatsoever. But this guy's, he bounced off the pavement, dude. And these guys just went about their way. Just, guy was at the wrong place, the wrong time. And it makes, like, downtown, even though it's safe, I would walk around. It's just one of those times where just a juvenile delinquent is just wanting to cause chaos like I did, stabbing tires, but I never got violent with people.
You just never know what people are thinking now.
No, dude.
I mean, there's some crazy people out there.
Fuck yeah, there
Hopefully we'll have some on the show soon. I am looking for more weirdos out there to
They are fun to have on a podcast. Podcasts are created for weirdos to tell their story.
Yeah, this is pretty much the land of misfit toys. If I can find somebody out there that's just a little off, I would love to have you on.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, like simulation theory. You talked about, you and Mama Kate were talking about simulation theory, maybe?
I don't know. But.
Yeah, I love like Joe Rogan's podcast. He'll have people on that talk about all this off the wall stuff that I have no knowledge of, that sometimes it's the first time I'm hearing it from him, and this idea of simulation theory popped up, where if we're creating virtual reality, that it makes your body feel so similar to being in real life that eventually we're going to get to the point where we're just plugged into some virtual reality. And
Mama Kate did bring that up. Now that the thing about
we'll live in a simulation. So people who live in their houses and they don't go anywhere, they watch Netflix all the time, or they're on YouTube or whatever. Like, have you seen the series Black Mirror?
I was about to ask you if you've seen that. I just watched one last night. It's the best show. I actually tweeted the guy to thank him for creating Black Mirror last night.
Dude,
swear to God,
so good. The whole Twilight Zone thing I used to be into, and science fiction I used to be into. And I've always loved, like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist myself, but I always love to hear conspiracy theorists talk about their things. Sometimes it gets a little annoying when you're talking about, like, jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, and it's like, I've heard this over and over and over. The JFK assassination always fascinated me. So,
which finally Trump put a...
Did he find you? Do you think he knows all those secrets now? How come he's not telling us that stuff?
I just thought it was awesome that I forget the guy's name. He looks like the Penguin.
Steve Bannon?
No, the guy who was running against Trump. Religious dude from Texas.
Yes,
forget his name. Yeah, I thought it was cool that
the Zodiac Killer.
That he pegged Ted Cruz's dad as part of the conspiracy to take out JFK. That was amazing.
Wouldn't you love it though if Trump tweeted a picture from, like, knowing the JFK assassination, is like, fuck it, I'm just putting it all out there. Like, all the secrets, I'm just going to put it out there.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Come on, that's what... We would love it if he did that kind of shit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
He's like, I got the documents. Alex Jones has talked to me. I'm going to give you the truth. This is the truth. Like, dude... They'd be like, shut the fuck up. Don't say anything.
He just unclassifies everything.
Everything, dude.
Oh, my God. Do you know how much our minds would be blown to know all the shit that they keep from us?
If Area 51 and all that shit, which I don't know about aliens. We
they do
all
tours.
Sorts of shit. Like,
on Trump buses.
Yeah, dude. Could you imagine? He's like, I got the doc. Like, after he leaves office and he's got all this information and he reveals it all. Come on, Trump.
And then he goes over and lives in Russia with Snowden.
Yeah.
It was the long con.
Do you have Amazon?
Yeah.
Sneaky Pete with Bryan Cranston. I think he created the show. They do a long con in this show. Highly recommend. It's a great show to watch. It's got Giovanni Ribisi, I think.
I'll try to check that out.
Yeah, good stuff. That kind of stuff, like simulation theory, it's fun to think about, but boy, don't stay down that rabbit hole too long, because you could, like all this stuff that's on the internet, you could really ruin your life by becoming obsessed with it all.
I have a friend that may or may not have done that already, because he thinks way too much about it, man, and he sees a black helicopter flying around, and it can't possibly just be a black helicopter.
Yeah.
It's some kind of crazy shit going on, and maybe it is, but at the same time, dude, you got to do more with your life than focus on what may be happening that you don't know. There's no way possible you could ever figure out all the shit going on in this world. Man. Sometimes you just got to move on.
It'll lead you down a path of like paranoia and worrying about things that you can't control this shit that's going on. Just worry about yourself and your community. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty inconsequential to your life. If aliens do exist and they don't want us to know, and you figured out they do exist, does it matter?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The only way it matters at this point is if they attack us. Because if aliens attack us, that we will come together as a species at that point.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah, it'd be like the world's 9/11.
Hey, people were so much nicer after 9/11.
No shit. Yeah, and we had enemies like, well, I was going to say tweeting. I don't think that was a thing, but we had enemies like reaching out and saying we're all Americans today and wearing Mickey Mouse shirts and stuff.
You think that would happen today?
Hell no. I don't think if it happened anywhere, it would, because it's happens so much.
Yeah.
Maybe not to that degree, you know.
But to the point, there's a lot of shit that happens to the point where you're like, oh yeah, another school shooting. Oh.
Yeah.
What's for dinner?
Even tsunamis, you know, like natural disasters, we're almost desensitized. And I think a lot of that has to do with our access to media.
Oh, dude.
Because now we're more conscious of
overconsumed. There's so much on. I remember back in the day having 3 fucking channels. 3 channels. You were lucky if you had a VCR, let alone a DVD player. And when everybody watched those 3 channels and you got to talk to everybody was watching this one particular thing, now you have communities of people, which I appreciate. You have communities of people that could be into one particular thing, and you'll never know that there's this community for this particular group of people.
Like furries.
Like furries.
I had no idea furries existed. And I don't want to beat it to death because I know I've brought it up before. But even furries have discrimination in their own community.
Oh, they do.
Because I watched a documentary and they were like looking down on people. These are people who think they're dogs and raccoons, like legit think that. And they look down on people who think they're flies and moths.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so bizarre to see these people just being like, that guy's fucking weird.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's stuff like that I find, like, those are the type of people I want to hear on a podcast.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get more people like that. Like the Tulpamancer thing, just because I can't wrap my head around it and I think it's weird, doesn't mean that I don't want to wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
You know, I would love if anybody listening is into any of that stuff, man, let me know, because I'd love to have you on the show. We'll do a whole, half hour to an hour over Skype, man. It would be a great time. As long as they're, knowing it's going to be a comedy podcast, there will probably be jokes and I'll be laughing about it. You got to be a good sport. Don't come on here like the Westboro Baptist Church and try to
horrible, dude.
Railroad me. But
when people or situations take themselves too seriously, like the thing I love, I'll get to that, but comedy. I love comedy. I love dark comedy. Some of the darkest jokes I've heard from people like Joey Diaz or Duncan Trussell or Joe Rogan, you hear these things that I laugh so hard at. I've been at comedy shows where they've said some really dark things that I would never say myself, but to think of them, it makes me appreciate life when I can laugh at the darkness. Mm-hmm. What is it? Tragedy and comedy are very similar.
Yeah, it's tragedy plus time equals comedy.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
So the folly of man really intrigues me. Like the idea that like technology is a parasite and that it has us obsessed with moving forward and growing it. Like the idea that that's its own species. Technology is its own species, and it's forcing human beings to create it to the point where we'll merge with technology. That's the kind of shit. Like when I'll sit around and I think, like some people think about just, you know, I wonder what the Cincinnati Reds are what baseball pitchers the Reds are gonna pick up, and I think about stuff like that. But every so often, after listening to a Joe Rogan episode or something like that, I'll think these thoughts that I had never really considered before. Psychedelics were one of those things. When I first started getting into them, I started listening to people like Timothy Leary or Terrence McKenna or Bill Hicks, or even Rogan himself when he's been on the DMT, the Spirit Molecule documentary. You listen to some of these guys and you're like, this is the kind of stuff that I was never taught by anybody. And the people that consumed that shit back in the day was more of people my age who we were all huddled around partying, and it wasn't a deep philosophical thing. So when I started like doing research and things like that, like I always enjoyed those kind of aspects of just sitting back and just having a deep, what could be considered a stoner conversation.
Yeah.
But I also think you have to have a balance and reality, and don't focus on that stuff too much. Don't stay in that realm too much.
Yeah, because it'll definitely mess with you, man.
Oh, it'll fuck your mind up, dude. There's so many burnouts that you see who stayed there too long, and then you'll see them at like a not Grateful Dead show, but they're like burnout hippies who you're like, man, they were the tragedies of excess.
I used to have a desk job. I heard a clip of Alex Jones on a news show.
Yeah.
And he just seemed like this crazy raving lunatic. I mean,
Which he is.
Well, yeah. But they just play like small drops. It's not really a clip from the show. It's just him yelling or something.
Yeah.
And I thought, I want to see what this dude's about, because I didn't know what he was about at all.
Yeah.
Like, I had no clue. And I tuned into a show, and I didn't know it was 3 hours every single day or whatever it is. You know, I have 8 hours to kill. I'll check it out. I wouldn't listen to a full show because it's a lot, but after a while, man, a lot of shit he said, I would look it up, and it would actually, like he said something about Bayer being a Nazi company or something.
Yeah.
And I look it up because I was mocking it, like, this dude's nuts. And I said something to the person at the cubicle in front of me, and they're like, no, it started in Germany and all this. And I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, dude.
Stuff he says checks out. And then I started listening to it more, and after a while, I thought, you know, I gotta quit, because even if this shit is true, there's nothing I can do about it. It doesn't affect me. I can't live this way.
Yeah, dude.
You know, it's too much.
All the people who bring up like the Rothschild, like there's some global,
the Bilderberg things.
Yeah, Bilderberg.
Yeah.
Man, there's so much of that because it's mystery, and it's part of human species to wonder where we came from, what we're doing here, who's controlling us. And you could really go down some rabbit holes and stay there a little bit too long. And when you come out, you might not trust other human beings. You might not, like, it can send you down a bad path.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do enjoy dabbling in that area. Just like hearing what those people have to say. And when I hear, like, I don't actually listen to Alex Jones podcast or anything. It gives me a headache after a while, and it makes me feel too paranoid.
It was fun for a little while listening. Yeah. And I did enjoy that every sponsor he had was some survival kit guy who wants to sell you seeds and meal plans that you could hide in a bunker. He had a lot of synergy with the sponsorship. I got to say that. He knew what his audience was looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are the kind of people, though, if shit does break down, if I see somebody with an InfoWars sticker, I'm going to be like, man, like, you packed all your food and shit. You can help us out, right? You got your guns. I know you got your guns.
Before we get out of here, I want to talk to you about the Gym City Comic Con coming up April 8th.
No, April 1st.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's April 1st. My stand-up comedy show is April 8th.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I totally got this switched around. Make sure you check out the comedy show. I already kind of plugged it. Gym City Podcast will have a show there at noon, live show. You guys have done quite a few live shows. Do you enjoy doing that?
I do. I've in my previous life, I was a religious man who preached a little bit.
Yeah?
And, I had some life-changing experiences back in the early 2000s after I became a parent, and then I started going to church because I thought that's what we were supposed to do, and I got really hardcore into it. Like I saw a lot of people who, they just did it for ritual. It was just something to do. They were just called themselves Christians but never read their Bible. I was like you see me with podcasts, I release 3 episodes a week. I go deep into something I enjoy, and I wanted to figure out religion and what made people seek something like that. So I gave my whole life to it for a few years. And then because I'm a person that questions and has questions and always seeking knowledge and always seeking answers to, and understanding like I don't have any shit figured out. At 44 years old, I still have less figured out than I did when I thought I knew everything back in the day.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I had the chance to preach. Like, people love a redemption story, and so if they hear that you're a kid who grew up rough and now you're able to have a troubled youth ministry, boy, you get some support in that community. And so I learned a lot about grace, and I learned a lot about community, and I learned a lot about speaking in front of people. So when I do Gym City Podcast, I'm passionate, like I love it, and I'm not scared to speak in front of people, and I don't really get focused on the ums and things like that I say. I don't give a shit. Yeah, everybody makes mistakes in their speech pattern.
Yeah.
And so I have fun with it, dude. When we have live shows or when I'm just able to sit down and have a conversation with another adult like you, who we're not looking at our phones, we're not bullshitting about the weather or about this or that, and you can have some deep, meaningful conversations with people, or they could just be funny joke, like just to pass the time. Mm-hmm. So for me, the live shows are just a celebration of what we do. April 1st at noon, we're going to do the live show. It's going to be in celebration of the 400th episode we'll release on March 31st.
Nice.
We've been putting out a lot of content since 2013. I joined on in late 2013 and took over releasing storyteller episodes for the local Dayton music scene, which Dayton has been responsible for the funk music, a lot of Dr. Dre's music, and the West Coast rap scene that was really popular in the 90s. A lot of that the root came from this area. The Breeders, Guided by Voices, all that stuff I grew up listening to and appreciating and going to local shows. So fast forward to a few years ago, I love music. I wanted to showcase local music and the artists, and me being part of the Gym City Podcast was a way to bring that to people. And so I do a storyteller episode that I release every Wednesday with a different artist. Gym City Comic-Con is a way for us to just have an excuse to do a live podcast, but also have a podcast Q&A. There's our local WYSO, our local public access radio out of Yellow Springs. They were having these podcast workshops, and they were charging quite a bit for people to be part of them. And I thought to myself, I understand they're trying to fundraise, but there's a lot of people, this is free for me. Like, there's people who ask me questions, and I'm like, I could probably get paid to be a consultant on how to start a podcast, and maybe down the road I'll do something like that. But for now, I just want to put it out there so we have an excuse to gather together and just chat about podcasting. Yeah. So that's what the podcast Q&A is going to be right after that at 1. And Gym City Comic-Con is at the Dayton Convention Center in downtown Dayton. It is April 1st and April 2nd. People come and cosplay. You can buy T-shirts, posters, comic books, figures. It's kid-friendly. And so we're going to do it in Panel Room A at high noon, and then 1 o'clock is the podcast Q&A, and I am really excited about it. Dayton Podfest we did last year, which was a group of podcasts that came together. That the thing about podcasts is you don't know if they're going to be around in a month, let alone 6 months. So planning something like Dayton Podfest is kind of tricky because you have to figure out who is putting content out on a regular basis, who is passionate about it, And I don't have time to really research and find everybody that does podcasts. So every so often I'll stumble across somebody that has a show, whether they shared it on Facebook, which if you guys are listening to this, and Jason might not say it all the time, but if you share his podcast, and you might not ever support his podcast by donating, which you should. He has a donate link at the bottom of the page on his website. Go donate if you can. But if you can't donate and you just share it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and you tag We Don't Have Cookies or hashtag We Don't Have Cookies, and I'm telling you, as a podcaster and as somebody who puts out content, one thing like that will fuel you to move forward for a while.
Yeah,
and
I appreciate you saying that too.
I mean, people don't understand, like, whether it's the YouTube videos you watch that people do and they put time in and you just watch, you don't ever like it, you don't ever subscribe or share. People, they use content, they consume content without realizing that one simple like, that one simple share, that one simple going, dude, I appreciate what you do, is enough to change somebody's life, to inspire them to move forward. Mm-hmm. And we talk about, how to change society, how to change the world, like all these big problems that we talked about recently. Focus on the small shit. You focus on the small shit, like let's say, like my house, my wife is a clutter. She has clutter. Mm-hmm. And I tell her, if you just focus 15 minutes a day on that clutter, it'll be gone after a while. So for me, I look at what we're doing as far as podcasting and as far as putting content out. Share it, like it, tell people you enjoy it. Don't put out what you hate, promote what you love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people spend a lot of time talking more about what they hate than what they like.
It's so enjoyable.
That's why I'm off of Facebook, man.
It's so enjoyable to troll and to just talk shit. I get it. There is room for that at times. But, man, if you share, that love, like everybody, the Beatles talked about it, Jesus talked about it, love is the answer, love is the key. I know it's kind of hippie bullshit at times to talk about, especially because some people don't give back love. But if you can ignore what other people are doing and just be yourself and share what you enjoy and be passionate about it, whether it's cars or whatever you're into, if you share passionately and try not to bash and talk shit so much, man, people will be drawn to you. They'll enjoy what you're doing. But definitely, if you're listening to this, share whatever content Jason puts out or whatever podcast you enjoy.
Going back to the Gym City podcast or the Gym City Comic-Con.
Yeah.
I'm going to be part of the podcast panel, which I'm looking forward to that,
yeah,
man.
Dude. Yeah,
Do I have to pay to get in?
What's that?
Do I have to pay to get in?
I think it's $5.
Okay.
It's super cheap. The guy putting it on, Jesse Noble, makes no money from it.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that's been doing it for a few years. It's moved around here and there. And he's a guy who just loves comics. He loves the geeky comic book community. And as somebody who grew up drawing Wolverine in my bedroom and dreaming one day that, I can't wait to see movies. Like, I'm living, like all the people bash comic book movies.
I love comic book movies. This is my
fucking world right now. I love that I can see the Avengers on the big screen. I was watching Civil War on Netflix the other day, and I was like, this is a fucking great movie.
It's funny because on an episode coming up later this week or next week, I'm not sure when it'll be released, I was talking about the upcoming Comic-Con and how I haven't really read a comic since, I don't even know. I was really big into G.I. Joe comic books. Mm-hmm. But as far as comic book movies and comic book TV shows, like I watch Gotham all the time. I love that shit, man.
Yeah, dude.
So I didn't really realize that I had more in common with the Comic-Con than I thought, because initially I thought, well, it'll be cool to go. It'll be cool to walk around. But once, I don't know why it just completely didn't register with me. But I went to watch Civil War at the movie theater. I went to watch Captain America, whatever the second one was, and Thor and all that stuff. I went to the theater to watch, and I don't go to the theater to watch anything, man.
Yeah.
That's a good point you made.
I usually go for those big Marvel movies. Some of them I don't like.
Batman versus Superman.
Oh, dude, I was so disappointed.
I didn't go to that.
I grew up
one.
loving Batman and Superman, and at the time when I was watching it, I was like, "This is awesome." I'm watching it, but what I saw at the theaters it's not a good movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, bring some cash if you have some. There's people who they make their own crafts and things like that. There's people who make their own T-shirts and have their own designs. There's people who make comic books, and locally, Dayton itself is one of the biggest areas for people who read. Like, there's a lot of people who read. There's a big geek community. There's local artists who will have their books and have comics to sell. Stuff like that too. So don't just come for the podcast. Stay for all the geeky stuff. And while you're down, since it's downtown, go stop and get a bite to eat at someplace in the Oregon District. Blind Bob's Bar in the Oregon District. It's a bar, but it's a place where a lot of local bands play. They have great pickle soup. And I'm on a low carb diet. Can't eat potatoes right now, and it sucks. But their pickle soup is amazing.
Sounds good. There will be a bonus episode, maybe 2 out this week, maybe 3. It's hard to say. It's been a very bizarre time the last couple of weeks. Look forward to doing that. And don't forget, this Thursday will be February's Dumbass of the Year and the premiere of Benny Mac. And if for some reason Benny Mac can't make it, I do have somebody else lined up just in case. So no worries about that getting canceled. And last Friday marked a pretty cool milestone for the show. Couldn't be more proud of this. I was downloaded in 100 different countries at one point or another starting Friday with Zambia.
Fucking amazing, dude.
Yeah, it blew my mind. I actually tweeted to my host Lipson because I noticed that I was at 99 countries for quite a while, and I thought maybe it's some kind of computer thing where it won't flip to 100. It just has 2 digits in that area. And they said, no, it's just, that's how many countries listened. And I got up Friday morning and checked the geo stats, and it rolled over to 100. And I looked, and Zambia downloaded the last episode. And I can't tell you guys how much it means that you've shared the show. I don't know if whoever downloaded it in Zambia got it because it was shared to them. I don't know too many people who know people in Zambia, so I don't know if that's how it got there, but it really means a lot to everybody that does that. I notice we've grown a lot in the UK, and to everybody out there who does do that, don't think it goes unnoticed. I try not to talk about it too much on the show because I've gotten some shit for talking about certain areas too much, according to some people, but it's nice to know that people outside of my area actually enjoy the show and listen.
Yeah, dude.
And I think Ohio's like, I don't know, the 4th or 5th place that consumes the show.
Yeah.
So that makes it nice that it's not just people I know listening, it's people who want to listen out there listening. And I love everybody for doing that, man. It's awesome. Please keep it up. Please keep spreading the word. We're going to get out of here, but I'll talk to you soon. And I was going to wrap it up a lot neater than that, but I wrapped it up on a really awkward way to wrap it up. So I'll talk to you guys and maybe tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Tell your friends about the show and leave a review.
I did shut my head in my car door once.